So, just a follow-up on the latest video about the Kursk stunt made by the Ukrainians. It all indicates by now, both from Russian and Ukrainian sources, Telegram channels, YouTube channels and whatnot. By the way, I realized that video when I made that video, I think only Dima had reported broadly on that one. Anyway, just to say that I was maybe a pot shot. I was right on the evaluation that I've made. I mean, it's a bit, if you follow the situation in Ukraine now since 2014, if you are a person like me who does that, you immediately understand that reality cannot be broken like that, right? Now, having said this, there are the operation would be, I think it was the only option the Ukrainians had to impress at this stage of the war. And if it had been done maybe in the earlier stages of the war with more means employed, and I'm saying this, I don't want to talk too soon, because Ukrainians still have one more play up their sleeve in the Kursk region. I will not develop this idea very much now, but it is possible. But anyway, the rest of the analysis that I made did address what's happening right now. So eventually this story it's going to be short for the Ukrainians. Eventually the Russians will catch up, because the only reason they have made the big arrow was because no army is standing in front of them, so they just ran. They had tremendous losses, and there are countless videos showing that, countless videos. Because remember that when they do this kind of warfare, this is not 1940. This is no longer 1940 or 1944. Although the Air Force already showed that it was a problem for a country which had no Air Force. And so the Air Force was the first to respond. Air Force and drones and missiles were the first to respond, and they have been decimating the material that the Ukrainians have put up there. Also, of course, we never know the success of the Ukrainians. It's more dependent on the flaws of the Russians than of their own doing, of their own competence in doing things, I think, in this case. But the Russians, the only problem is that somehow they did not expect that, or they did and let it happen anyway. Seriously, I do not know, because if we analyze it, we see that how come a front line, a war, an open war that has been since 2022, and you have a front line, a part of the front line which is not guarded properly, with defenses constructed and barriers. Even if you had a minimum amount of army in there, you had to have the proper defenses in order not to let the armored cars advance like they advanced, right? So I think that's one last point for the Russian management of the front. On the other hand, if this all will turn, will end up like I think it will, despite the losses of the Russians, because they had losses, because they had to rush reinforcements, it was chaos because the reinforcements, the roads were clogged with civilians fleeing. This is well played on the side of the Ukrainians. But eventually, after all this it takes maybe a day or two to clear up this mess, and then things will restore balance, because Ukrainians are running against time there. And while they were still free running, the Air Force always kept on pummeling them. And now the Russians are doing a wise move, because despite the Ukrainians trying to pull their air defenses to the front line, some of those air defenses have been destroyed, and they are valuable assets for Ukraine. And now the Russians are attacking the head of the snake, or the base of that mushroom that they formed over there, the roots of the problem. They are attacking with FAB bombs, gliding bombs, and I think, I will not say unprecedented amount, but in a very significant amount. So, on other words, they don't need to fight to head on the Ukrainian army that already advanced inside Russia. They just need to cut their logistics, and eventually that army will crumble. Not very difficult, in a not very difficult way, because don't forget that this Ukrainian army there is not entrenched like the rest of the Ukrainian army on the rest of the front. Sometimes we're talking about fortifications with more than 10-year-old, very deep encrusted in the territory. So we're talking about very precarious positions that they gain, footholds that they gain due to their speed, due to the surprise. But in order to maintain a strong defense now, to hold that territory, you need to entrench, you need to dig up there, and you need, of course, a logistics corridor proper to supply those forces with not only with all the things that they need, ammunitions, food and whatnot, also hospitals and evacuation of wounded, all this logistics, but also replenishment of the forces and building up of reserves there. And all of this has to go to a narrow corridor which lacks in support of artillery, which lacks in drone support, which lacks in all kinds of supports. So they are sitting ducks for the Russian aviation. So, if I'm not mistaken, the Ukrainians, in a move which seemed to be a brilliant one, ended up committing a very huge mistake. Of course, only the end of the story will tell if this is true or not, depending on what they can achieve. But by now, the reports we are getting, it seems like they are stalling, and they are stalling actually much faster than I expected. And so the question is, what have they gained with this? Well, first of all, they gained one thing. They gained one of the objectives they have also been running after, which is the media victory, right? The hype. Hey, we are just going in force, swiftly capturing town after town and within Russian sovereign territory. It seems like it makes a big impact. So I don't know what they were. I still don't know what they were trying to achieve. If it was the power plant, the nuclear power plant of Kursk, if they wanted to, if they somehow still have the goal to destabilize the Russian society, to make such a move that the Russian people would put in question their government and their management. One thing I know is that each time they do this, the Russian people galvanize. They're not gonna abandon their best chance. They're not gonna. If you have a difficult situation there, but you have a government that is holding up, you want to support this government. You don't want to throw your government unless you and your whole family are starving, which is not the case, right? Because if you go to Russia, every needs are met, society is functioning well, despite all the sanctions, and this has galvanized the Russian people around their government. And it doesn't matter, you can write on the comments all your critics, and please do, but it really doesn't matter all the accusations of lack of freedom, of lack of this and that. Look, I don't want to go too much on that tangent, but the thing is, Russian society will crack down on any suspected dissent, because they know if they let dissent run amok, this dissent easily gets connected with the West, gets funded by the West, always with beautiful flags and beautiful ideals. And this is the root cause of color revolutions. The Russians have seen this countless times happening in other countries, and they're not going to allow it to happen there. So yeah, so they do crack down on these people. This can easily be mistaken by lack of freedoms and of liberty, but if you go to Russia, I tell you one thing, and I think I've told this in previous videos. So I'm talking about the disruption of the disruption of the Russian government with this attack. Dissent there, people there can talk freely, and I've seen this. I've been with multiple persons, different persons, random people, and the first day, the first person that I've established a conversation with was the first one to criticize the Russian government, and he didn't know me from anywhere. So when you live in a fierce society, you don't act like that. You don't know the person you just met, so you're not going to talk about certain subjects, especially if you are against your government. Especially if you have criticism to do to established powers. That's not the case. People talk. But if the Russians suspect that you have somehow belong or are trying to organize through this non-governmental organizations, if you are receiving funding from, the likes of NED or some other subsidiaries, and you are trying to build a movement funded by the West, I mean, you will have no chance. They will crack down on you, because that's a matter of defending sovereignty. And you cannot be naive as saying, oh, they are violating democracy and freedom. Look, the United States does exactly the same, if not worse. They will crack down on you if they suspect anything. They just raided Scott Ritter's home because of what he's saying. And I mean, they have Guantanamo, and I don't need to go into this. So this attack might have had this intention. Don't forget that you remember when Moscow used to be attacked by drones? Those attacks stopped. And one of the possible reasons, and very plausible one, for the ending of these attacks was the fact that they were not having any results. No result whatsoever. No people, they were having the opposite result, or the opposite of the desired result, which again, galvanizing people around their government. We've seen it on the elections. So, of course, then you have the other theories of possible goals might be to gain a foothold. I myself thought about this theory, gaining a foothold in order to gain strength at the negotiation table. But I also said that I really doubted that the Russians would really concede to this. And I hold that opinion the same. They will not. Even if the Ukrainians manage to retain a little bit of territory for months or two, this will not change the other realities of the front line. The Russians understand this. They hold a position of strength, not of weakness, and this will not change anything, and this will only hurt Ukraine, because something tells me that there was some kind of gentleman's agreement over that front line that was broken. And also, I don't buy the American and UK not being involved and pretending to be surprised about that incursion. I think they not only were aware, but they were part of the heavily involved in the planning to do it. Of course, the media victory, maybe this is still it's still a look. I'm saying this, but I'm not. How do I say? I'm not taking value out of this deed. It was an audacious deed. It caused problems to the Russians. It caused casualties to the Russians. Those poor conscript kids. The casualties of the people that the first army that responded in columns to the crisis. So yeah, they cause problems, but eventually this is far from enough to achieve any strategic goal, any goal at all. And this will only weaken the Ukrainians more. At the same time, Ukrainians keep trying to do these landings and attack on the southern part of front, on the Black Sea, and on the Dnieper River in the south, in the Kherson region. Again, only trying to make PR stunts. In one of these cases, it was a very typical one where they landed, it was a short fight, they managed to secure a small foothold, but then they put up the flag and they left. Is this a way to conduct a war? Is this a way to waste your human resources? The only way this war is conducted like this, and missions like the Kursk mission is being done, because it's suicidal, it's because it's the Americans and the English running the show. They don't care about the Ukrainians. This is my firm belief. They do not give a slight whatever. I don't want to say bad words. But they do not give a fuck. Okay, I said it. They do not give a flying fuck about the Ukrainians. That's their reality. They're not allies. They are vassals, and they are the battering ram. So they can easily be sacrificed. They can bump their head against the Russian door. It doesn't matter if they die. No one will really care about that in the West. If people really cared about Ukraine in the West, even the unconvincible pro-Ukrainians, they should have rise up and talk about this and criticize this at least. Ukraine is being destroyed, and it's solely the West's fault. Okay, but the next days will tell us more. I think the offensive has run out of steam. We're going to see how the counteroffensive is going to develop. But there are still other parts of the front where Ukraine can develop fresh offensive. I just don't know if they have enough reserves to do it. Because if you look at the map, they left a salient, which if they had another thrust from another direction, they could form a very dangerous pincer and engulf a significant portion of territory of the Russian Federation. But I don't know if they're going to go for this. I think it's a long shot. I really expect that the Russians will not leave these fronts unguarded again. It was strange that they did, really strange. But in the end, it will play in their favor despite the losses. Okay, guys. I hope I see you on the next one.